with, we're going to look at what people say back extensions do. Now, it's very simple. They strengthen and stabilize the lower back. Now, in some respects, this does happen. So that, let's just say, is the reward that comes with doing a back extension, but there are risks as well, which is what we're going to talk about. But just to go back to the strengthening and stabilizing part. Now, again, they're talking about strengthening and stabilizing the lower back. Now, the idea of a back extension comes from, the best way I can describe it is like a bodybuilding idea or philosophy of training, which is essentially to break down the body into its muscles and then train those muscles. So, for example, if you want to train your arms, you do bicep curls, and then you do tricep extensions. Legs, you do your quads, your hamstrings, your calves. So you've got all these different muscles that the body's been broken up into, and then to make those muscles stronger, you train them. The back extension comes from that idea of training. So it's come along, people have assumed that there is a weak lower back, so they've gone with the idea at the time, which is the bodybuilding idea. Well, we need to strengthen these muscles. So how do we do that? Well, the back muscles work to extend the spine, so therefore we will extend the spine and work those muscles. Strength will come with that, and in some respects stability will come with that as well. But as I mentioned before, there are risks to that, which we'll discuss in the next part. So there is truth, and this is where, in some respects I can agree with people. The lower back will strengthen, but that isn't exclusive to the back extension. As I've mentioned, there are risks that come with it, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next part. And this is what else does the back extension do. So there is no denying, as I've described, there is a strengthening and stabilizing element to the back extension. Now, what are these risks that come with it? There are high levels of compression around the spine, number one. Now, if you have a spine if you have back pain, and the back pain is enhanced or triggered by compression. So what I mean by compression, there are two types of compression. Axial compression, which is a load on the top of the spine, compressing it down, and then there is another compression, which is like the best way I've found to describe it is you've got a sponge in your hand and you squeeze the sponge like that. It's like you're squeezing water out of a sponge, and then obviously the water comes out. So that's another type of compression. So you get high levels of compression with a back extension. Now, if you have a deconditioned back that isn't great at coping with lots of compression because it's a step too far, or it's you jumping in at the deep end, if you will, then it's not going to be the most effective. As I mentioned before, if you have back pain that doesn't like compression, then again, it's probably not going to be the most effective exercise. And what I mean by that is, if you are tested and assessed and gone through a suitable consultation which questions triggers of lower back pain, and it comes out that you have intolerances in your lower back around compression, then it's probably not going to be the most effective exercise. So let's just say two categories of people might be people who have got back pain which don't like compression, and potentially, I have to remember that word because some people take what I say out of context, potentially new people to the low back strengthening arena, if you will, because it could be, and again, highlight that word, could be a step too far. They could be jumping in at the deep end. So we have to understand that as well. And as coaches and as trainers, we have to understand the people that we are giving this to. Hence, we need to take them through some degree of a consultation, asking them questions, and then some sort of physical assessment to understand this. The second things that they do is is the flexion and extension cycle. So when you go either down into the back extension, so if you're on one of the machines that I have at the gym, you go down and then you come back up. That's known as a flexion extension cycle because your spine goes into flexion and then goes into extension. Now, these flexion and extension cycles have been associated with problems with the facet joints. They have been associated with intervertebral disc delamination and intervertebral disc prolapse herniation or bulging. So we have to understand that, again, that is a mechanism of injury. So that flexion extension cycle is a mechanism of injury to the spine. Now, there are people that will complain about that and not like that as a comment or whatever, but as far as I'm aware, and I've read it from multiple sources over multiple decades, and it seems to be consistent information that the flexion extension cycle is a contributor to those types of injuries. And then when you add load to the flexion extension cycles, it only speeds up that mechanism. So again, this would go towards if you were someone who had a spine or a lower back that pain was triggered in flexion or extension, it's probably a useful thing to not do the back extension. So that would be another part of it. Another one is anterior shear. So when you are lifting with a flexed spine, so again, if you've got if you're going into that flexed position in a back extension, when the spine is in a flexed position, you get anterior shear. So the vertebra above wants to essentially fall off the front of the spine. It's not going to, but forces pulling on the spine are sort of creating that mechanism. Now, when you maintain the neutral posture, the muscles of the lower back create a posterior shear force. So essentially, that force gets neutralized. So again, forces on the spine are more evenly distributed. They're not, when it's flexed, they're not more pulled forwards. It's more evenly distributed. So again, that has to be understood when we're talking about a lower back exercise and a person's lower back. Because again, if they've got back pain, if we're starting to understand that their spine is irritated by shear forces, then it's probably not going to be useful to do a back extension. Again, you can do what you like. That's not my argument here. I'm not telling you to stop doing it. It's about giving you the information as to why back extensions may not be so useful. And as I've mentioned before, they put, certainly in the extension cycle, they put unnecessary load through the facet joints and can cause irritation there. So again, you get irritation through the disc, you get irritation through the facet joints, you get irritation through the anterior shear forces of it. So if you've got a spine that you know is irritated by any of those, it's probably not useful to start doing it. If you've got someone, or if you are doing it and it irritates the lower back, again, it's probably not a useful thing to be doing. So these are some of the risks that come with it, because every exercise has risk, every exercise has reward. We've just got to understand the thing that happens with a lot of information out there is they'll either only look at the risk or they'll only look at the reward, and then that will give them the bias to tell people what exercises to do or to not do. But when we understand the different risks and rewards of the exercise and the different amounts of risk and different amounts of reward that come with it, because what also will happen is it's not only the physical posture or motion that you go through, it's also the dosage of the exercise. Because if you go and do one back extension now with a bad back, it's probably not going to have that much of an effect. It may irritate it, but it may not, or it may just have such a small effect that it doesn't really matter. The body will recover from that and you'll be able to carry on. But if you went away and did 50 of them, it's probably going to cause that much more of a problem. And then if you did 50 of them 3 times a week or 5 times a week or whatever it may be, then again, that's only going to be enhanced, if you will. So the physical mechanism is a problem, but also the dosage of that mechanism is more of a problem. So again, that has to be taken into it. So there's not only a posture element that needs to be taken into selecting exercises, there is also a dosage, which again has to be understood well enough by the person either choosing the exercise, be it a therapist or trainer, or the client themselves, or the person using the gym themselves. So that's sort of some ideas of what else the back extension is doing. What we'll now start to look at is how we then go about training the lower back.